It's day 287 of the Ukrainian resistance. Ukraine Media Center, Ukrinform continues its operation. My name is Vasyl Samokhvalov, and joining us online is military governor of Sumy region, Dmytro Zhyvytskyi. Good afternoon, good afternoon. We'll try to make it as quick as possible. We know you have meetings, the challenge within the last 2 days. I'm talking about the Khotin community, Zdobnohorodska community. What are the consequences? Well, the challenge are going on during of the communities along the borderline. Within the last couple of days, a lot of infrastructure was damaged, including power grid lines, waterways, and in the Khotin community, there was a direct hit of a shell into a hospital, a newly rebuilt building equipped with all the necessary material and equipment, and where the inhabitants of all the adjacent areas received medical help. So it was directly hit by a shell, which resulted in fire and full destruction of this hospital facility. There were also hits in one agriculture business facility in the same community. 17 cows were killed. There was another hit in a different community. In a cow stable, the horses and more cows were injured. We see that Russian terrorists, they fight the civil population, the hospitals. The center of the town of Bilopilya was shelled recently. It's a former regional capital. The apartment blocks were hit, and the adjacent areas were hit by the artillery fire, as well as the town hospital. One of the sections of the hospital was completely destroyed, and we urgently, together with the emergency services, covered the roof and the windows with the film to save the heating system in the hospital during the temperatures below zero. So we expect this building to be rebuilt, so the inhabitants of Bilopilya may continue to receive high-quality medical services. There were hits on the religious facilities. One of the male monasteries was hit. The utility structures were destroyed there, and the shellings are going on a daily basis with a different density. Yesterday there were more than 30 hits by mortar fire. The day before yesterday, more than 200. The enemy uses MLRS, mortars, large caliber cannon artillery, self-propelled artillery weapons. All the arsenal that is available to them, they use for shelling of our towns and villages along the border. Within the last week, more than 10 private houses were destroyed. The fences, the sheds, garages, cars, and unfortunately a 15-year-old boy died in the center of Bilopilya. He was a member of our family which had 4 kids, and he had an enemy shell explode right by his side, and he died immediately. So this is the situation in our region. So yeah, we understand, but in how we better call it, the sanitary zone along the border with Russia, what's the humanitarian and security situation there? How do people survive there? Were we available to evacuate people from there? And what do you see on the other side of the border? Do Russians built some fortifications? Well, talking about the life on the border, the situation is quite tense and threatening, because nobody knows whether it will be during daytime or in the night. The shelling would happen. The young families with the kids left those areas. There are more elderly people who left, who don't want to leave their houses, don't want to leave their pets, or their cattle, somebody has land plots, so people want to stay at home even no matter the risks to their lives. Regarding the work of the utility services and provision of the civilians with heat and water supply, we have a centralized heating in 100% for 100% of the consumers in the area. The utility services and the emergency services work on the mitigation of the damage. Yesterday there was a damage of the power lines. Our guys put out the fire, and Obelenерgo works 24/7 on rebuilding the aerial lines to provide people with power supply. We have rolling power shutdown schedules in effect in the region, and sometimes the towns and villages are being switched off in emergency mode, and unfortunately sometimes the power supply covers the needs of the population from 30 to 50% only. Your questions, please. Irina Mamchur, Ukrinform. Could you please tell us whether you can point out 3 or 5 communities which suffered most after Russian shelling, if it's possible? And did the nature of Russian shellings change with the advent of winter? Or I mean, maybe they switched more to UAVs from artillery, or the other way around. Well, talking about the communities which suffered the most, so the community which suffered most from bombardments was from the beginning of the war, from February and the beginning of March, due to the warfare which was going on in the region after the presence of Russian troops. Trostenets, Boromlyanska, Konotop region, Lebedin community. So those are the big towns which suffered most the bombardments. And after liberation of Sumy region of Russian occupiers, the communities which suffer the most are those along the border, because they are being shelled from Russia. Unfortunately, we have the longest border, almost 564 kilometers, which always find themselves under fire. So starting from the border with Kharkiv region, Velikopisarev, Krasnopilya communities, Miropilya, Yunakiv, Bilopilya, Vorozhbyanska, Khotinska, Seredonobudska, Gluchivska, Esmanska, so all those communities along the border, and all the way from border with Kharkiv region to the border with Chernihiv region are all the time under fire. The nature of shellings changes sometimes. The enemy uses more MLRS fire, uses 152 caliber, it's 120 mortars. They previously used smaller calibers of artillery, and starting from autumn they target more the objects of a critical infrastructure, gas stations. They try to target small transformers which feed small towns, or the grain silos, the water distribution facilities. They try to target residential areas. They target the centers of the villages. Recently in one, we had 2 people killed just in the central square of a village right near the border. They just came to a general store to shop, and they were killed by a fire. And a young woman died in the center of Velika Rybitsa in Bilopilya community. The seller, she just went out of the store to talk on the phone with her kid, and she was killed by a shell dropped from a UAV. All right, the last question was the situation with the power supply. The situation is complicated, as I mentioned, with the electric power supply due to the permanent shutdowns, and the limits that we have, they only cover the basic needs from 30 to 50%. We don't even make any comparison to the periods of the previous year. We switched part of the businesses to the nighttime operation. We try to save electric power, but still we're missing it. A lot of energy infrastructure installations are destroyed from the beginning of the war. In fact, 2 big electric substations were destroyed in the region. There were rocket attacks and missile attacks on the big substations operated by Ukrinform, and after the latest missile strikes on the central part of Ukraine and the northern parts of Ukraine, those which were receiving power from Kursk nuclear power plant, now we're totally disconnected from Russian power grid, and we're on the edge. We're on the edge of the Ukrainian power grid, and unfortunately we don't get enough limits. We don't have enough power coming to the regions, so almost half of the region is always without electric power supply. Okay, that's clear. Thank you very much. Joining us online was Dmytro Zhyvytskyi, the military governor of Sumy region. And at 14:30 we will be talking to Mr. Vitaly Kim, the military governor of Mykolaiv region. Thank you. See you shortly.